Welcome back, or if it's your first time, I'm glad to have you here. I'm Matt Fendora, and you're tuned in to the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, where we journey together toward becoming the best version of ourselves. Using mind, body, heart, and spirit as the anchors of our podcast, join me as we set sail into the depths of self-discovery, unraveling the interconnected layers that shape our growth. If you resonate with today's conversation, consider subscribing to the podcast. Your support means the world to us and ensures you never miss an empowering episode. Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, a podcast all about being the best version of yourself through mind, body, heart, and spirit. Today, I am joined by retired Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch is an internationally recognized keynote speaker and the author of the 2021 release, Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Are Meant to Be. Both his leadership talk and his book are based on his 40-plus years of leadership experience in combat, peacekeeping operations, disaster relief operations, and in the boardroom. Oak highlights principles that will benefit today's leaders and inspire the leaders of tomorrow in any profession and at any level of leadership. Oak's proudest accomplishment is having had his hand in commissioning of over 580 lieutenants, leaders for the Army and this nation. What makes Oak's heart sing? Being able to help others become better leaders through his message, which include his keynote talks, his book, being a guest on podcasts, and through his blogs, articles, and comments on social media. Without further ado, here's Oak. How are you doing today, Oak?
I'm doing well, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. Really excited to dive into these 40 years of leadership experience. It's not every day where you get to pick the brain of somebody who's been in leadership for so long as you have.
Yeah, well, I've been looking forward to this show. I'm really looking forward to it.
So, to get to know you a little bit more, I was wondering, what was it like in the Army when you joined compared to what it looks like now?
Yeah, well, I always teased all these lieutenants that I was commissioning. When I came in the Army, there were no computers. There, I can remember doing you wrote all your op orders by hand, and then you did it on a mimeograph machine. There's a thing from the past that most people won't even remember. And then, of course, we didn't have cell phones. In the first Gulf War, I remember my wife, when I left, she had our 18-month-old son, and she was 7 months pregnant, and she had our daughter while I was there. Mm-hmm. And I got word that she was in the hospital, had just given birth. And so I drove an hour and a half to a phone bank. I waited my hour and a half for my 15-minute call. And I got back in the Humvee and drove back, hour and a half back to wherever I was. So it's a lot different. And that's just the simple things that are different. It's not the same Army as I grew up in by any means.
So what was it that you did in the Army? Like, what was your job and your expertise?
Yeah, so I was a combat arms officer. I did my first 5 years as an infantry officer, which included Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 1990, 91. And then as a captain, I switched over to Armor Cav, and I did a rotation to Bosnia, did one to Kosovo. During those times, once as a infantry lieutenant and once as a armor captain, did hurricane relief operations here in the state. Mm-hmm. One for Hugo in Charleston and one Andrew down here in Florida. And so really I was a leader of different size units, everything from a platoon of 32 guys all the way up to, I had a company of 375 men and women. And then I was an operations officer where I wrote the daily operations during our Kosovo deployment in peace back in Germany. And then I ended my career in the Army, running an Army ROTC program as a professor of military science at the University of South Alabama. And that was probably one of my most enjoyable jobs in the Army.
Why is that? Why was that your most enjoyable one?
Because I got to influence the leadership of the future of the Army. So, when I took over that program at University of South Alabama, there were 53 cadets in the program, and we were commissioning, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 a year when I took over. And when I left 3 years later, we had 179 cadets in the program, and we were commissioning 15 lieutenants a year.
Wow.
Um, and a lot of them still stay in contact with me. In fact, it's funny. Last December, um, actually not this last December, but the one before that, December 2002, I was in Savannah, Georgia for a conference for my old job that I retired from in October. And one of a lady that I commissioned from my ROTC program back at the University of South Alabama back in 2007, 2008. She was stationed at Fort Stewart right outside Savannah. So we had lunch together. And she told me, she said, sir, I just came out on the lieutenant colonel's list. You think that did make me feel old? um, and I asked her, I said, well, now that you're going to be a lieutenant colonel, what's your aspirations in the Army for the rest of your time? And she said, I only have one more goal. And she says that I want to go back to the University of South Alabama and be the professor of military science there and run it just like you ran it.
Wow.
So that's really, I mean, influencing people, creating the next generation of leaders for the Army and the nation. Because that really, to me, I named my book Your Leadership Legacy, and a lot of people ask me, so what does legacy mean to you? And to me, legacy has two parts. A very small part of it is what you actually do. Now, in the real world, results do matter. So it does matter what you did, but as part of your legacy, that's a very small part. And the reason I say that is because like my ROTC program that I ran, when I left, somebody else came in and now it's their legacy. So, very short-lived if your legacy is tied to actually what you did in that organization. To me, your legacy is that next generation of leaders that you produce, who then produce the next generation of leaders and on down the line. And that's where your legacy can really be powerful.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were in the Persian Gulf, you did Desert Storm, Desert Shield, you were in Bosnia, Kosovo, I think is what you
And
said.
Kosovo, yes.
Kosovo. You were in Charleston for the hurricane, Florida for the hurricane, and then the University of Southern Alabama. Where else were you stationed at?
Oh, I've been stationed all over the world. In our 23 years, my family and I moved, I think, 12 times. So for me, it was Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Stewart, Georgia, Fort Lee, Virginia, Fort Knox, Kentucky, uh, Fort Irwin, California, out in the middle of the desert, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, 2 tours to Germany, Vilseck and Stuttgart, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, Canberra, Australia, and then Mobile, Alabama at the University of South Alabama. And then I retired from the Army. But I've been in 45 countries on 5 continents. So never would have been able to do that if I hadn't been in the Army.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I was lucky that the very first place I got stationed at was Japan, because if they
Yeah.
wouldn't have done that, I never would have been
Oh,
leaving the
absolutely.
States.
Absolutely. Now, some of those places I've been, I don't ever want to go back to. I didn't leave anything there, and I don't need to go get it. So, but a lot of the places we not only I, but my family and I were lucky to go to and got to see some amazing things and do some amazing things.
You said your favorite place was doing the ROTC in Alabama. What would be your second favorite place?
For me, not my family, but for me, it was probably Fort Irwin, California. Uh,
Really?
I was an observer controller out there, so I got every month a new unit rotated through there, and I got to observe them running through missions and then try to help them. Again, that's I think that's part of me, I guess. Try to help them become better by going through, okay, this is what we were supposed to do. This is what you did. Now let's figure out how to get better at it. And I loved it. And it was 2 years out there. Um, Wife and kids probably didn't love it so much. I mean, we used to call it the world's longest cul-de-sac, because there's only one way in and one way out, and it's 34 miles.
Oh, if you had three takeaways from your experience in the Army, what would those three key takeaways be?
Yeah. Servant leadership. I had a bunch of bosses. Believe me, I had some bosses that were authoritarian, micromanaging bosses too. We all have, and nobody likes to work for people like that. But I was lucky. I had some really good servant leaders who taught me that was the way to lead. I would take away self-discipline, not discipline, self-discipline. And I guess I would take away the drive to be a winning culture. That you don't get to decide you're going to quit. You're in it, and you got to win. And I guess one of the things that drove that home to me was I was lucky enough to hear General Hal Moore speak twice. An amazing man, probably one of the greatest combat leaders this country's ever produced. And one of the things I heard him say one time was, life is not like baseball. It isn't 3 strikes and you're out. He said, if you try something and it doesn't work, you try something else. And if that doesn't work, you try something else. And if that doesn't work, you try something else. And you keep trying until you figure out what works. He said, that's life. That's, don't ever give up. Just keep trying and you'll find it. You'll figure it out. And I took that away. I heard that when I was a senior first lieutenant. And I took that away from that. And that was always my philosophy. Look, I'm just going to keep trying things and we'll figure it out eventually.
Mm-hmm. You emphasize the difference between discipline and self-discipline. Why did you emphasize that?
Because to me, if you really want to be successful in this world, you got to have self-discipline, not somebody standing over you telling you what to do and making sure you do it. I mean, we can do that with anybody, but those aren't the people who are successful. The people who are successful have self-discipline. They do what's right because it's the right thing to do, even when it isn't in their best interest or they don't feel like doing it. And I always I tie motivation and self-discipline together. And I think they really go together. And this is why. None of us are going to wake up every day and be motivated. That's not real life. There are days you're going to wake up and you're just not motivated to do what you need to do. If you have self-discipline, then that self-discipline will make you do what you're supposed to do when you were motivated, or if you were motivated, even though you don't want to. So I think it's important to have that self-discipline to drive you to do what's right, even when you don't feel like it, or even if it's not in your best interest. And as a leader, there's certainly times you have to make decisions and do things that aren't in your best interest, but they might be in the best interest of the organization or somebody in your organization.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody were working on their self-discipline, how could they go about correcting that into making that stronger?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in routines inside of routines. Go figure, being an Army guy. I just think that's how you develop habits, discipline, those type of things. So, I start my day every single day. Every day I start it exactly the same way. I don't care if I'm here in my house or if I'm out on the road on a speaking engagement in a hotel. I start it the same way every day. I listen to the daily mass. I read a couple chapters of the Bible. I do my daily prayers. And of course, I have my coffee. And then, that starts me on my day right. And then, then I end every day exactly the same way. I write in my journal. I keep a daily journal. I read a couple a couple pages out of it, whatever book I'm reading at the time. And then I do reflection. I reflect on what I did that day and what I could do to get better. And if you haven't added reflection to your life, you need to. Your life will change because you don't learn from experience. You learn from reflecting on that experience.
Mm,
Experience means nothing if you didn't learn anything from it.
yeah.
Um, so you got to reflect on it. And I had a boss one time who, in the Army, we did reflection with after action reviews, and I learned that process. But then he said, well, add it to your daily life, add it to your life, and reflect on what you did today so that you can get better tomorrow. And I started doing that. It makes a difference.
Yeah. I can definitely see the importance of that. It's not just about experience, but you have to learn from those experiences. And how are you going to learn from that if you don't reflect back and look at, hey, what did I do today? If we
Yeah, and
don't,
be
if
honest. You have to be honest. If you're not honest, then you're wasting your time.
yeah,
And I don't. The other part of that is I don't care if what you did today was great. Doesn't mean it can't be better. You can always do something better. I don't care how well you did it. So even reflect on the things you were successful and you did well. Is there a better way to do it? Can you get a little bit better at it? That's what drives that winning culture. And look, I want to win. I don't care. And if you don't want to win, I don't want you on my team because I want to win all the time. I don't care if I'm playing old maid with my 10-year-old granddaughter. I want to win. I, but that comes from that desire to be the best you can be at whatever it is. I remember my dad told me one time when I was a kid, I was complaining about doing some job. I was working out on a farm and not complaining about it. And he said, son, I don't care if you're sweeping the floor, be the best floor sweeper there is. He said, be the best at whatever you do, no matter what it is.
I feel like that was similarly. That was one of the lessons that I learned at my first duty station when I was a young Marine was I was on duty with somebody and they said, you always leave the place better than when you got it.
Yeah.
And that's what that reminds me of.
Yeah, absolutely. And the winning piece of it for me was again driven by my father. Growing up, he had this thing called the 75% rule. And he used to tell me, son, if you can't do something better than 75% of the people doing it, then you need to do one of two things. You either need to figure out how to get better at it, or you need to go find something else to do because obviously it doesn't matter to you. And I lived my life with that rule. I'm not sure my brothers did, but I did. I took it to heart, and I lived my life by that rule. And I tried to pass it on to my kids, and I'm trying to pass it on to my grandkids because again, you try to be the best at whatever you're doing, and if you do that, life's going to turn out pretty well for you, I think.
Hmm. So what inspired you to start your leadership journey to begin with?
Well, I've been, I guess it goes back to high school. I was always selected as the captain of my sports teams. I was captain of the baseball, basketball, football team. I was student government president. I was class president. So I started in those leadership positions early. Um, and then I figured out that I kind of liked it and that I wasn't too bad at it. And so then I was looking at what I wanted to do in life, and it just made sense to me that I wanted to go in the Army, and so I figured, well, I want to go in as an officer to be a leader, and 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 so that's what got me started down that road as a leader as an adult. But I think I always had the leadership ability, and I get asked all the time. They think they're going to throw a tricky question at you, and they say, "Are leaders made or are they born?" And I think it's a combination. I think there are people who do have innate leadership ability. And if you don't believe me, go out on a playground with a bunch of 5-year-olds. There's somebody out there that all those kids are following.
Yeah.
Nobody appointed that other kid as the leader. Nobody
Yep.
taught him how to or her how to be the leader, but those kids are following that person. So how do you explain that if people aren't born with some leadership ability? Now, you need to develop that. To be a good leader, you got to develop that over years and experience and all those things that it takes. But I do believe that and I was one of those. People followed me and did the things I wanted to do. And so I think I've always had that. And I just realized that I wanted to be a leader and that I wanted to develop it to be even a more powerful leader.
I've definitely seen that in the playground. My 6-year-old is that kid. You're all of a sudden
Yeah.
you look over and she has 5 friends and she's telling them all what to do, and you're like, who are these kids? Where did they come from?
Yeah.
And
She's got her own little fire team.
yep. So of all the branches, why did you choose the army?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So, right or wrong, whether or not it's right or wrong, it was certainly my perception, and I kind of still believe it. Again, whether it's right or wrong, people can certainly have their own opinion. To me, again, it came down to leadership. I knew I wanted to be a leader, and the Marines and the Army, leadership is about people. The Navy, it's about ships. The Air Force, it's about airplanes. And knew I couldn't be a pilot, so wasn't going in the Air Force, and I had no interest of being on a ship for 6 months to a year out at sea. So it was either the Army or the Marines, and I chose the Army route. I kind of didn't have a choice in that I applied to the academies and I got accepted to West Point. Also got accepted to the Coast Guard and the Merchant Marine. I did get accepted to the Naval Academy, but then I found out that only the top 10% get to pick being Marines. So again, it came down to I want to be a leader of people. So to me, it made sense to go into the Army.
Got it. So at what point did you decide after you retired that you were going to create a book to pass on your legacy?
Yeah. Well, my last, I guess that would have to go back to my last assignment on active duty, that when I was a professor of military science. I was going around talking to high school kids and college students about leadership and about life, being successful. That's the other talk I give, is how to be successful. And I'd always ask them, so what do you want to do? What do you want to be? What profession? And they'd tell me what profession they were looking at. And then almost always somebody would say, and I want to be a leader. And I'd say, well, great. The world needs more good leaders. What does that mean? What does it take? And you get that deer in the headlights look. They had no idea. They thought they wanted to be a leader, but they have no idea what it takes to be one.
Mm-hmm.
And if we really dig into it, at that point in their life, they probably wanted to do it for the wrong reason, because they wanted the title and the privileges and the better pay and let's face it, leaders get those things, and that's okay, as long as that's not the only reason you want to be the leader. If that's the only reason you want to be the leader, please go do something else, because you're not going to be a good one. So I came up with this leadership talk about what it takes to be a good leader. And I've been given that since 2006. Obviously I've added some things and changed some things, but premise is pretty much the same, because leadership principles don't change. They're the same, and they're always going to be the same. And so fast forward, then I was a leader at the food bank there in Mobile, and then I was recruiting for Army ROTC, still going around talking to high school kids, and so I always knew I wanted to write that book. Stuck probably about my professor of military science time, I knew I wanted to write the book, and because I knew that I had something that needed to be passed on. And in my book, I don't even think the word theory is in my book. That's not what this book is about. It's everyday things that every leader can do to improve their leadership skills and ability, while at the same time empowering the people they have the privilege to lead, and it is a privilege, to be better, not only better workers, but better people, and to make your organization better. And if you make them better, your organization is going to be better. So I knew I wanted to write it. And I guess when I did decide to write it, my wife and I and her mother and two people that live in the condo with us, we went to a motivational / how to revitalize the Catholic Church talk. And it was a 3-hour long talk. And the guy who gave it, phenomenal speaker, Now, obviously, he didn't speak for 3 hours. He spoke for 45 minutes. We took a 15-minute break, 45 minutes, 15-minute break, 45 minutes. And every time there was a break, I went up and I was picking his brain about speaking, and leadership and motivation and all those things. But because he was doing what I wanted to do, I wanted to get out and be a speaker and talk about leadership. And he gave me a lot of good insights and a lot of good information. And in the very last 45-minute session, I went up to him and I thanked him for, spending time with me and giving me some ideas. And we said our goodbyes, and he turned around like he was going to walk away. And he turned around and he said, "Oh, have you written a book?" And I said, "Well, John, I'm thinking about it." And he said, "Stop thinking about it and write it." So I went home that night and I wrote out the table of contents. That was the 15th of February. So I started writing it on the 16th of February, the next day, 2020. And I published it on the 12th of February 2021. So just under a year from the day I started till the day it was published.
Wow.
I guess I just needed permission.
So your book is your leadership legacy. If there were 3 ways that people could focus today on working on their legacy, what could they do today to work on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think number one is work on empowering your people. So one of the things I am adamant about is the evils of micromanaging. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. And when you micromanage people, not only are you hurting that person, you're hurting your entire organization. But what you're also doing is stifling creativity. Because the way creativity happens is you use other people's skills, other people's knowledge, other people's abilities. So give somebody a task, train them to standard, give them the task, give them the resources they need, people, time, money, equipment, whatever. Give them the authority to make whatever you're asking them to do happen, and then get out of their way and let them do it. Now, that doesn't mean you wash your hands of it. You're still there to check up on the person, to answer questions, to provide more resources, whatever. But you let them do it the way they want to do it. And will they do it the way you would have done it? Absolutely not. But who cares?
Mm-hmm.
And the analogy I always use is 7 plus 2 is 9. But so is 8 plus 1 and 5 plus 4 and 6 plus 3. Who cares how you get to 9? You just got to get to 9.
Mm-hmm.
So let them figure out how to get to 9, and you'll be amazed at the creativity that they bring to that topic. That's that task. So empower your people, get out of their way. And that's hard as a leader sometimes. I know it. Number 2, get to know your people. And I mean at a personal level, not just at work. I told all 580 something lieutenants that I commissioned, I said, your goal every day as a leader should be to go out and find one person in your organization and find out one new thing about that person. Not about work, about their personal life. What's their spouse's name? What's their kid's name? What sports do their kids play? What hobbies do they have? What do they like? What don't they like? And I tell number 1, that builds trust, because that's what leadership is about. It's about people, and people aren't going to follow you if they don't trust you. I'm sorry. I don't care who you are. Mm-hmm. So it builds trust. And number 2, the other thing that it does is that now you can make decisions based on, when you assign jobs and tasks to people, you can make decisions based on what they like, what they don't like, what you think they're good at, based on knowing them, rather than just throwing out, okay, John, now you're in charge. John might not even be good at what you're putting him in charge of, and you don't know it because you don't know the person. And there's a couple of easy ways to get to know people. First of all, get out from behind your desk. Nobody wants to follow somebody who sits behind their desk all day. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Now I got it. Leaders have to be behind their desk sometimes because there's things you got to do. But every chance you get out from behind your desk and go out and be with the people you have the privilege to lead. Number 2, go out and ask questions. And, one of the things I had a boss who retired, a 3-star general, and he told me one time, he said, Oak, never, ever, ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said 2 things happen when you do that. Number one, you show people you're no better than they are. You got to go get your own cup of coffee just like they do. Again, building some trust there. Mm-hmm. And then number 2, if you're lucky, you got 2 or 3 different ways to get to the coffee pot and back to your office. And along the way, you stop and you talk to people. He said that's how you start to build a rapport with people, and you start to get to know them. And that's huge. And I guess if it was the third thing that I would recommend that people do is improve your communication skills. Mm. So many leaders today don't know how to communicate. And oh, by the way, communication also means listening. Mm-hmm. And very few leaders today understand that that's part of their job as well, is to listen. But so many leaders today do not have good listening skills. And one of the things and it's happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to every leader that has ever led and assigned somebody a task. You'll assign somebody a task and you'll say, you got a week to complete it. And they'll bring something back to you in a week and they'll say, here you go, boss. And you look at it and you're like, it's not what I asked for. You know what? If you look back on it, it is probably exactly what you asked for. It wasn't what you wanted, but that is what you asked for. It's what you told them you wanted. Mm-hmm. So we got to get better at communication. And I blame these things for some of that. We got to get back to face-to-face communication. And I can tell you, having worked with 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids for the last 15 years, they hate face-to-face communication. They think if they send a text, they've communicated. And we all know that's not true. I forget who it was, some famous person. I don't know if it was Emerson or it was one of the poets, I think, said, the biggest problem with communication is that we think communication actually happened. And unless you do face-to-face, that's why I like face-to-face. If I'm telling you to do something and I'm looking you in the eye, I can tell whether or not you understand what I'm asking you to do. Yeah. Can't get that over an email, over a text, or even over a phone call. So as much as possible, do face-to-face communication.
Mm-hmm. So one thing you mentioned was trust and gaining the trust and rapport of people. And one thing you talk about is 360-degree trust. Could you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, I think everybody understands the piece of trust that is the people you lead have to trust you. I think even horrible leaders understand that principle is there. Whether or not it actually happens for them, another story. Mm-hmm. But at least they understand that that's an important tenet of leadership, is that the people you're leading have to trust you. That's a given. It's the most important part of the 360-degree, beyond a doubt, because if that doesn't exist, none of the rest of it matters. So the person you're leading has to trust you, but you as the leader also have to trust that person, that they're going to do what you ask them to do. They're going to have that self-discipline to do the right thing, even if they don't want to, but because it's their job and it's the right thing to do. So that piece is kind of back and forth. The leader-led, that's what allows the leader-led relationship to happen. They trust you, you trust them. Without that leader-led relationship doesn't exist. Then everybody on your team has to trust each other that they're going to do the right thing and they're going to accomplish their mission and they're going to do what's asked of them and do it well. And that comes through training and holding people to standards. You can develop that trust so that everybody understands, that everybody knows what they got to do. And then the fourth piece of that 360-degree trust circle is outside your organization. They have to trust you. Other people outside your organization have to trust you, and you have to trust them. And that's especially important in the business world, because nobody's going to do business with you if they don't trust you. Mm-hmm. And I hope you wouldn't do business with somebody you don't trust. So it really is that 360-degree trust. And if any part of that is missing, then your organization is not as effective or efficient as it could be.
So what is one way that people, let's say the within part, the team within can build trust?
So I think that, you have social events, you bring them together so they get to know each other. The importance of a leader getting to know the people that you're leading. What's just as important that the people who you're leading get to know each other. And I think maybe you have a luncheon once a month in the office or outside the office. You have you celebrate special occasions. Birthdays, anniversaries of being with the organization, or achievements. If somebody does something very well, you celebrate that as a group. And then I think you also you encourage people to talk to each other. And one of the ways you do that is you set that example by going around talking to people. But then you force them to do it as well. And I say force them. If you do it right, you're not forcing them. They'll see you doing it and you encourage it, then they'll do it as well. And part of that, maybe you set up a break room where, they can all get together in a room when they're taking their break, and they can sit around and talk and get to know each other a little bit. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but it's important that they get to know each other. And it all starts with you. If you don't make an effort to get to know them, then they're going to think, well, why do I need to know anybody else here? I'm just here to work my 8 hours, draw my paycheck, and go home.
Mm-hmm. Some mandatory fun days, right?
Yeah, mandatory fun, as we used to call it in the military. You will be here and you will have fun. But if you do it right, it doesn't turn into mandatory fun. I mean, it may the first 1 or 2 times that you do it, until they figure out that, hey, I can have a good time there, and I will get to know some people and build those relationships. And if you do it right, they'll figure that out.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that's important to you is servant leadership. Can you explain to the audience what is servant leadership and why it's important to you?
Yeah, well, I think so. Well, the reason it's important to me is because the best leaders I ever had were servant leaders, and I saw that that's what gets results. It gets the right results and helps everybody, not just the organization or that leader. So to me, servant leadership is very simple. And I used to explain it to the cadets when I was training them, and I still use it when I talk to CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies. I say, look, being a leader is not about you, and yet it's all about you. And they look at me and they say, how can it not be about me, and yet it's all about me? Well, it's not about you and the title you get or the privileges you get or any of that other stuff like we talked about earlier. That's not what being the leader is all about. Being the leader is about taking care of the people that you have the privilege to lead, making sure that they have the training they need, making sure that they have the education opportunities that they need, going to get certificates, or maybe even having a way for them to get their associate's degree or bachelor's degree while they're working in your organization. Everything you can do to make them a better person, not just a better employee, but a better person, is what your job as a servant leader should be. And one of the things I used to tell lieutenants, brand new lieutenants, the day they got commissioned, because I went to all the commissioning ceremonies and I talked to every single one of them, and I'd say, congratulations, enjoy today. Today is all about you. Okay. You get to do something. You get to become an officer in the United States Army. It's a privilege. Enjoy it. But just remember, now that we have pinned those bars on your shoulders and now you're an officer in the United States Army, tomorrow morning when you wake up, it will never be about you again. It's about the people you have the privilege to lead. It's about your organization. It's about the mission. It's about the Army. It's about the country. And then if we have time, we might talk about you, maybe.
Mm-hmm. So what is the next step for Oak in his legacy?
Yeah. So now I really am just concentrating on speaking engagements. I'm writing my second book. I'm taking that success talk and I'm going to turn that into my second book. And I'm really just concentrating on speaking and trying to pass on my message to as many people as I can. I just got done last month. I was in Columbus, Ohio, speaking to 40 small business owners. The month before that, I was in Columbus, Georgia, talking to all the police chiefs in the state of Georgia. And I've got about 7 or 8 more scheduled for the rest of the year here. But that's really what I'm concentrating on, is getting out and passing my message on to as many people as I can. And like you said in the intro, I got 4 ways to do that: my keynote talk, my book, being on podcasts. I think this is the 161st podcast I've been on.
Wow.
In 17 different countries. And then writing articles and blogs on social media and commenting on other people's comments and articles and blogs on social media, just to get that dialogue started, because we gotta do better at producing leaders. And in my opinion, we got to get back to producing servant leaders who understand it's not about them, it's for the betterment of other people.
So now that we're getting to the end of the podcast, I have 3 questions which I ask all guests. These questions are over the topics of live, love, and grow.
Okay.
So the first question I have for you is, what advice can you share about how to create a life that leaves a positive impact on the world?
Go out and make a conscious decision to make a positive difference. I tell everybody, everybody's goal in life, I don't care if you're a leader or not, every human, your goal should be to make one positive difference in one person's life every day. And that's doable. I'm not asking you to do 10. If you can do 10, good for you. One person, one positive difference every day. Imagine how much better our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, our state, our country, the world would be if everybody made a positive difference in one person's life every day.
Yeah, huge difference.
And that's not even counting the ripple effect that would cause.
Yeah. So question number 2, what strategies or practices do you recommend for people looking to enhance their self-awareness or self-reflection?
Yeah. Get into the habit. Figure out what your habits are. We all have habits. Anybody who tells you they don't have habits is lying to you. Okay. We are creatures of habit. Figure out what your habits are. Figure out which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to do away with, because it's up to you. You can decide that and you can make it happen. And the ones you want to keep, or the ones that you think you might want to add, then make a conscious decision to get into that routine of routines. Do it day and day and day at the same time, doing the same thing, and eventually it will become a habit. And if you concentrate on the good ones and concentrate on making good habits, in addition to that, you're going to be a better person in the end.
And the last question I have is, what is one actionable tip someone can do today to grow 1% better?
Yeah, it goes back to reflection. That's what it's all about. If you reflect every single night on what you did today, I promise you tomorrow you'll be better than you were today.
Awesome. How can the audience connect with you?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways. I've got a website, www.ltcoakmcculloch.com. And on there, it has my cell phone, my email address. It has all the links to all my social media: LinkedIn, Instagram, X, Facebook, whatever else, YouTube. And so just reach out. And if you want to talk to me, to ask me a question, just to talk, I'm happy to do that. Or if you think you might want me to come speak at your next event, reach out and talk to me. I'd love to do it.
And how can the audience support you on your journey?
Yeah, I guess, on social media, follow me and like what I'm putting out there. If you like what you heard today and you're looking for a speaker, then hire me. And I promise you, if you get my book and you read it, you will, I don't care what profession you are or at what level of leadership you are, you will take something away from it. that will help you be a better leader. And I think a better person, not just a better leader.
Mhm. Well, Oak, it was really great having you on and learning from all your experience. Made me reminisce about my military days too, which obviously weren't that long ago, but still, those
Yeah.
memories are still in, and they definitely got brought out. And I just want to acknowledge you and appreciate you for all the work that you're doing, teaching people leadership, which is an invaluable skill to have.
Yeah, it is. Whether you're going to be a leader or not, and that's what I tell these CEOs and presidents of companies. You got to have a professional and leadership development program for everybody in the organization, not just your leaders. Because the more you teach and train the people who aren't leaders what good leadership is, the more they're going to demand good leadership. And that's
Mhm.
only going to make your organization better. And who knows, somewhere down the road, they might be one of your leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this is the perfect way to end the podcast talking about the importance of leadership and how we should apply that today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me as a guest, Matt. I really appreciate it. And I had a great time.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast. I hope you took something away from this episode that you can implement today, just like I did. After doing some research, I found out that in order to be considered a 1% podcaster, you have to make it past episode 20. We are now officially past that. In honor of becoming a 1% podcaster and your continued support, I'm hosting my very first giveaway. It's my way of giving back to you for showing your support. Now, there are 2 different ways to enter to earn a $25 Amazon gift card. The first way is by leaving a review. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, take a screenshot, and send it in via my website, mattfindora.com. One lucky winner will be drawn from this group. The second way is by sharing this podcast on Instagram or LinkedIn and tag me in it. It can be a clip I've shared, your favorite episode, or the episode you're listening to right now. The second winner will be drawn from these individuals. The winners will be announced via email and on April 29th's podcast, so make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss your name being called. And once again, thank you for supporting me and this podcast. Good luck. No matter what you choose to do, choose to live, love, and grow. Thank you, and have an outstanding day.